He says, I have discussed sufficiently as far as my anubhava or reading of nature allowed me. I may now add a few lines for the seekers to reveal to them the secret of success. Meditation is the foundation of spirituality. If you meditate having your real goal before you, you are sure to arrive at the destination. So this is the crux actually. Meditation is the
Just one sec,
foundation.
there is a lot of echo.
If you meditate having your... So I was just reading a few lines from the conclusion of efficacy of Raj Yoga. I'm trying to give a background why this session, why we are holding this session. To understand the reason for holding this session, I'm trying to give you a background actually. So he says, I have discussed sufficiently as far as my anubhava reading of nature allowed me. I may now add a few lines for the seekers to reveal to them the secret of success. Meditation is the foundation of spirituality. This is very important. Meditation is the foundation of spirituality. If you meditate having your real goal before you, you are sure to arrive at the destination. So that is the main point. But what happens if you ours is Raja Yoga only, but it's a modified form of Raja Yoga. Like if you take our traditional what is called sadhana chatushtaya, that means viveka, vairagya, shat sampati, mumukshatva. If you acquire all those conditions like viveka, vairagya, and shat sampatis is all those mental tendencies, and then mumukshatva, you're craving for liberation, then only you should go in search of a guru. That is our Vedantic tradition speaks about. If you, but if you take classical yoga also, what Patanjali says, he says, if you want to meditate, you should have a state of vairagyam also. Okay. But then next chapter, he says, he addresses the question of people who do not have vairagya, but then whose minds are always running outside for pleasure seeking and for fulfilling desires and all that. What will happen to them? So he says you should resort to karma yoga, kriya yoga. And kriya yoga, he says there are three aspects to it. One is tapas. Tapas is self-control. The other is swadhyaya. Third is Ishvara Pranidhana. Tapas is self-control. That means what we have discussed already. SOB sir has said, no, stimulus, observation, response. Suppose you want to go, some friend asks you to go to a club. So you have to ask whether it will be helpful for reaching the relevant to reaching your goal. You control your impulses, desires, and thoughts, which will help you move towards the goal. That is called self-control. So the tapas is nothing but doing it. Swadhyaya is now what we are talking. Swadhyaya is reading literature of the master, observing your own thoughts and feelings constantly. So that is called Swadhyaya. Third is Ishvara Pranidhana, whereby you dedicate all your work to the master. Whenever you are doing any job, you dedicate that job to the master. By doing these three things, what happens? The bundle of the network of samskaras in your subconscious mind gets broken. They become weakened. When they become weakened, and when you meditate at that time, what happens? When the power of the divine enters into your mind, that will try to, destroy all these samskaras, and then you move towards success. So this activity of studying master's literature is only to purify our mind, so that you'll be able to do better meditation. So you are constantly read his books, and if you read, there's several ways of reading it, because if you with reverence and with an open mind, if you listen, you see, then the impression it forms in your subconscious will be much more powerful, and then your mind to that extent becomes more purified, and to that extent you will be more successful in your meditation. So each person has to, but this present reading we are doing just to be involved in his thoughts, so that it is a part of a swadhyaya. But like for example, today's diary saying is there. He says you should feel the presence of master continuously. I mean, that's what, yeah. He says, question is, what is it? He says it is a state of being which should remain permanently as long as we live thoroughly in contact with the being, smelling at each step the fragrance of the being. That could be one idea of goal of life. So this idea, we have given it in the diary. So as a part of spiritual training, this also comes under what is called swadhyaya. That means you have to reverentially take this input as a data input, and then keep thinking about it very deeply from all angles till you feel that the message which Babuji is trying to convey, his idea has got a feeling behind him also. That feeling has been understood in your heart and in your intellect. Then try to hold on to that thought as long as possible, and the whole day you can keep on self-referential, self-observation you have to do. How much this thought, I'm living up to this thought, or try to remember the thought of the master again and again. This 24 hours exercise you can do. That is also part of a swadhyaya. And this activity we are doing so that, we get accustomed to, because I know so many people are so busy, they are not, they do not have so much of time to spend reading about the master. So we are trying to become familiar with his thoughts and ideas, so that itself acts as a purificatory process, and itself helps us develop a feeling of love towards the master. That is the idea of this 11 o'clock Sunday meeting. I think it should be clear now. So now what we'll do, we'll start it. We'll start with this because so many people have not. We can start with the religion topic, okay, of reality at dawn. Some of you can start reading it, one of you. So what we'll do, as I told you, every sentence of master is coming from this center source itself. It is as if God himself is speaking. So every sentence is capable of motivating you. Every sentence is capable of helping you to move into his consciousness. So we'll generally read with a feeling of reverence, and if there is any clarifications we want, any further understanding on this, we will, so all of us can contribute and then go ahead about it.
Fine.
Yeah, anybody can start reading it. Dharmesh, you can read, or anybody else who is very...
who wants to read?
The quest of mankind, ever since its birth, has been to worship God, to unravel the mysteries behind the outward appearances, and to grasp the fundamental truth. This is the genesis of religion. The worshipper has before his eyes the eternal bliss of the paradise, or some similar view, which he aims at as a final approach. There have thus arisen religions in the world with their prescribed forms and rituals, based upon the personal, practical experiences of their great founders. But after the lapse of thousands of years, when the entire surroundings have changed and the life has undergone a radical transformation, the same old forms and principles are being adhered to. Please let me know if you want to stop anywhere, sir, for further explanation.
You can stop here, let the idea sink into people. Intellectually, it is easy to, because it's straightforward.
Yes, sir.
But if you dwell on that idea further, you will enjoy it more and more.
True.
Because the more you are dwelling, mind you are dwelling in his consciousness only. When you think of the master, he is in your heart, he is around you also. So
Yes.
you dwell in his thought, you are dwelling in him. It is as
True, true.
simple as that.
Yes, sir. The outer form alone now remains intact while the inner spirit is lost. The result is that the vehicle of religion has become hackneyed, and it will not be wrong to say, hackneyed, right? Yeah. And it will not be wrong to say that present day religion has become only a relic of the past or the bones of the dead. We have really buried true religion in the grave. Only we clap hands in the name of religion and do nothing else. The real spirit is lost, and the only formalities remain in its place. The outward forms and rituals are only things that remain open to view, which are followed with extreme orthodoxy and tenacity without even the least touch of reality. Our faith in reality has thus diminished to the point of extinction.
धर्मेश म्यूट करना किसी को.
I'll continue. Our faith in reality has thus diminished to the point of extinction. It is rather twisted into forms and rituals alone. Gradually, it degenerates into bigotry or prejudice, which has unfortunately become the permanent feature of the present day religion. Our blind faith in formalities keeps us in the dark regarding the reality, and unconsciously we develop within us a feeling of hatred against these or those who believe in other forms and rituals. These are consequently jealousies and quarrels among the followers of different religions.
Yeah, we'll stop here.
Okay.
We all know what prejudices and what how we hate other people from other religions and all that. This is a very lot of most of the wars, if you see, they're all based on religious wars only. Hindu, Muslim, Christian, this thing, intra-religious wars, Shaivites and Vaishnavites, between Shia Sunni fights, between Protestants and Catholics. More number of people are killed in the history because of religion or spreading religion and trying to subdue people from other religion. So religion very probably in the first generation only people who are followers of the prophets, they could get a glimpse of what reality is, what is the nature of truth and reality. But rest of the time, after the second generation, I think the religions have become, the spirit of the religion has been buried in the grave. That's what he says. And the prejudice is a very, you see, nowadays there's what is called I will talk about it later. Let us finish it. There's a lot of scientific basis behind prejudices and biases and all that. What is called confirmation bias and all that. I'll talk about it later because that is favored by the evolutionary process. Evolutionary psychology says that people who are who have developed, like why a person is having jealousy, why a person is having prejudice towards other religion. There is a reason behind it that is related to the success of passing on the genes to the next generation of that particular clan or that community. So, so there is a contradiction between evolution and the search for realization also. But we'll talk about it later. We'll go to the next this thing.
Okay, so I'll continue. India has
Yeah.
achieved political freedom, but self-independence or the freedom of soul is it still wanting. The main obstacle is the want of capacity for a broader vision and free thinking. The whole atmosphere is surcharged with prejudice and rivalry. The entire structure of society and culture rests on the same foundation. Sectional jealousies are the main cause of the downfall of our civilization. These are at present no less than 3,000 castes in India, each forming a distinct unit. These castes were originally the different guilds of workers and artisans organized in order to solve the question of division of labor. But today, each guild tries to cut itself off from the rest of the community, forming a separate independent unit, harboring feelings of hatred and jealousies towards each other. The whole society is thus proceeding towards disintegration. The time is now at hand when this evil shall soon cease to exist. Nature is at work to put an end to this evil.
ఇప్పుడు
The
ఓకేనా?
psychic of, sorry, the sight of the time is unsparing. Let this serve as a warning to the ardent supporters and advocates of the caste prejudice. They cannot escape the consequences unless they mend in time. The will of God must have its course. Prejudice is the greatest evil, rather the deadliest poison to spiritual life. It keeps one confined to oneself, losing all access to a broader vision. It creates narrow mindedness, and all prospects of development and progress are lost to those who pin the souls to it. Prejudice breeds hatred towards others, and it is nothing but a feeling of false self superiority in a disguised form. If you nurture this evil, you thereby add one more link to the existing chain of egoism. Consequently, you remain farther away from reality. The realization of the limitless thus becomes an impossibility. Universal love, the very fundamental basis of religion, having disappeared altogether, the religion, which was generally considered to be a link between man and God, has now become a barrier instead. If we keep ourselves bound fast to a particular form or practice without a clear idea of its real significance and final approach, then we are probably committing the greatest blunder. God is not to be found within the fold of a particular religion or sector. He is not confined within certain forms or rituals, nor is he to be traced out from within the scriptures. Him we have to seek for in the innermost core of our heart. I pause here. If any explanation or question,
Yeah, we
comments, we
pause
can
here.
discuss. Yeah. Yeah, it's a very
So
great message.
basically, he's talking about prejudice. ఇప్పుడు but this is so subtly present in majority of the people because it is a very ubiquitous thing, prejudice. You see, like for example, like an Indian, I now criticize Americans that they practice slavery. You know, they treated black people like inhuman beings. But if you see, in India we have caste system. We don't allow certain class of people to enter our villages itself.
Yes, sir.
Is that not a prejudice?
Yeah.
So we also carry prejudice, but then we different forms people are having prejudice against different classes of people, different professions, different sects. Caste prejudice is very, very powerful. Dharmesh, if after the end of this thing, if people are interested, I will send you an email which discusses about there is a neurological basis why prejudice is maintained at a subconscious level. People are not even aware that they're having prejudices and they defend it. Why that happens is there's now a neuroscientific basis is there for that. It's just a cartoon. I'll show you, and then you will be people will be able to appreciate. And there's an inner resistance to, like suppose if I now criticize Dharmesh as a Guju karke, if I do that thing, you know, or Maharashtrian as a Ghati or something, you know, you will feel offended.
Yeah.
Like that. If I, you know, each person, like we were called, Telugu people by Tamilians used to call in a derogatory fashion. We get offended and angry, we pick up fights and beat them up also. So that is That is it is impregnated in the consciousness of the person. You don't even know that it is existing. But your mind will be reacting against it. You don't even know that prejudice is existing, especially caste prejudice, regional prejudice, color prejudice. You see, in India, people if you see marriage, this thing, fair,
lady.
bright, why prejudice? That means the black people are bad people. They're not good people. That means no, that notion is there. That is also prejudice. The truth is, everybody has come from the source should be treated in the similar way. All have come from one source. The children born to the same mother should treat each other equally. I'm talking about the sixth commandment. So the perfection of human ability lies in the devotee remaining always in the sphere of devotion. So suppose if God is present in me, is present in you, and you have come from the same source as the Ikshop, from where Master has come, you have come everywhere. So I have to treat you with the same respect I treat the Master. So if I treat you, you're a Gujarati, no, you're inferior to me, you are from lower caste and all that. That is prejudice in a very extremely subtle form. Because if you get upset in your thoughts when somebody talks in a derogatory manner to your caste or to your region or religion or being an Indian or something, if anybody criticizes me as an Indian in a foreign, I'll get upset, I'll get angry also. Then I'll try to defend, even though the person may be pointing out the evidence that in certain respects, in certain judgments in India was wrong, we'll get angry. That is prejudice only. So it's a very deep-rooted phenomena. Unless swadhyaya, unless you do introspection, very deep introspection, it is very difficult to come out. Unless you know, you cannot cure it. And unless you know it and then put it before the Master, then only it will go. Otherwise, even if you accept that as part of your this thing, that defect will not go at all. So swadhyaya actually means introspecting and trying to know the present state of your mind, present state of your feelings and thoughts and notions should be clearly known to you. Then the question of further progress arises. Like in one of the messages, Babuji says, you should know your present position clearly. Then you know that how much you are a slave to those notions, slave to these notions of a caste and region and color and profession and being a rich person and a poor person. You have a prejudice that you feel that you are a rich person is you are more favored by God and all that. God has blessed you. Which is the common feeling in America that God has blessings are there, that's why Americans are prosperous. So that is a prejudice. God will bless even though you're a poor person, but then we are having a prejudice like that. So the spiritual training involves swadhyaya. Swadhyaya again means observing your own thoughts and feelings very, very clearly and then noting it down in the diary. And if you are meditating that God is, the subtle presence of God is present in the heart and your mind is resting on that subtle idea, gradually these things have to go. If they're not going means there is an obstruction and then you should go and report to the trainer, he will remove it.
One question I
But
had.
if this, if you are not aware of your defects, nobody can help you.
Sir, I
So
Okay.
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, please. We have a lot of time and we can talk.
Can we say that when we say prejudice, some prejudices could be based on the past experiences of that person. So can we say that we generalize that experience and then apply it as a prejudice?
No, you see you must, in spirituality, what we are saying that, brain functions in a very automatic way. You see, you have a reaction, you have an experience with somebody and that experience is bad, that experience forms a part of your database. And when you meet somebody else, And then if somebody else belongs to the same community or same caste and all that, instantly in a billionth of a second, your past data will influence your perception. अच्छा ये North Indian or South Indian, Maharashtrian है, ये Gujarati है, Marwadi है, ये बदमाश है, अच्छा आदमी है. Automatically you are responding. That means you are an automaton. You're not you're not using your scientific view. You do. Any person who are coming, you're not supposed to have a prejudicial approach to him. So when you do cleaning properly, all those data will be removed. Only divine consciousness will be there in your heart. Divine consciousness will not judge what is right and wrong, what is good and bad. It is got universal love. So you will treat even though that person has insulted you, you will still treat him with respect, following the sixth commandment. So that indicates that your cleaning is not correct. Cleaning you have to do, the trainer has to do. The entire past data has to be removed. And when you're meeting another person, it has to be very creative. From the present position, like fifth commandment, you have to behave like a God himself. From a cosmic viewpoint, you have to interact with people. That is why, that is the meaning of the fifth commandment. You cannot, if you are generalizing your past experience and then interacting with people, that means you are limited. You are not progress spiritually.
No, yeah,
that memory in the evening cleaning, that should have gone. Evening cleaning, that interaction with that person which has created a favorable or unfavorable, that should go. Spirituality basically means that you want to, good and bad is a notion. What you find is an unpleasant experience. For some other person, 10 people will perceive it as a good experience. It's a perceptual, each person's, like now about 29 people are following this. Each person perceives the message of the master in a totally different way, because each person's background is there. Unless if all the 29 of us are living in universal consciousness, where universal love is established, where our ego is gone, then all 29 of us will be thinking the same thing. What understanding arises after reading the master will be the same understanding on all the 29 of us. Now it will not be like that, because each person has got a background data, past previous janmas, thinking, your life experiences, suggestions from society, all those things form your database, and automatically your perceptions are colored by those data. When Babuji uses an article called Gita, they're colored. Colored means the perception is colored by your past experience. Perception is colored by your narrow-minded view. That's why you should become broad-minded. He uses the word broader view. Why we are not having independence of the soul? Why? Because we do not have a broader view. Broader view is you transcend the intellect itself. You transcend mind itself, and you go to the spirit itself. Spirit is infinite, whereas mind is limited to certain concepts of gender or name, caste, religion. All these things are limited, narrower view. You're following my point, that if your perception is still being driven by an experience 2 years back, that means your meditation is not being done in a scientific manner. That is the conclusion we have to take, because there is what is called, we'll talk some other time, it requires a lot of hours of discussion to understand some of the mechanics and psychology of the mind.
No, true, sir. What you said, right?
When occasion arises, I'll talk about it.
Yes, because I sometimes wonder, because we in our system we all had the experience of divine presence within us by Master's grace, but despite that we still sometimes have different opinions. We had differences, right? So I can understand where this could come. because of colored approach,
No,
as you
no.
said.
The perceptions are different, and as a spiritual person, like we are now, if we call ourselves as disciples of Sri Ramchandra, we have nothing to do with the different perceptions of people at all. And we should have tolerance for everybody, because everybody, whatever those persons, so many people have left the organization of Ramchandra Mission, ISRC and all that. Nothing,
Yeah.
but even then they are part of the same divine force. They are part of the fraternity only. So our duty is to, our viewpoint we cannot change because their perception is different.
Yes.
So that is one fundamental of spirituality.
Yeah.
But we should be very clear that our mind should be fixed on our goal. We should not leave our thought away from the focus of our consciousness should be on our goal, consciously or unconsciously. So that is the main job which we should try to train our mind, so that the trend of the thinking is towards the direction of God and towards the direction of the goal. That is more important. And perceptions, people are different. They feel that these people are spiritually not advanced, so I'll have better training out. They will go, what is that is Babuji says it is, if you feel that Guru is not delivering the job, he will find another Guru. So that is perception is correct from his point of view.
Okay. So shall I continue, sir?
Yeah, we'll continue. Or anybody can, Vivek, anybody can read.
Yeah, please.
Because you can continue. I'm just saying.
Yeah. So there are various conceptions of God. People look upon him differently according to their capacity and understanding. The most commonly accepted conception of God is eternal power. But the philosophic view goes much beyond and includes the idea of Nirguna Brahma, or indeterminate absolute, which is above all multiplicity and distinctions. It is the ultimate cause and substratum of existence, the supra-active center of the entire manifestation, or the absolute base. It is beyond quality, activity, or consciousness. It is also known as Parabrahma. Next comes the idea of God as supreme existence. We see the universe with all its diversities and differentiations, and we are led to believe in its creator and controller. We call him Ishwar or Saguna Brahma, or determinate absolute. We think of him as a formless eternal existence, which is omnipotent and omniscient and possesses all the finest attributes. He is the efficient cause of the world, and he is also its preserver and destroyer. It is only when viewed from this lower standpoint that God, as the God of religion, becomes an object of worship. This is the final approach of almost all the religions. So far, God is conceived of as Nirakar or formless, but possessing of certain attributes. This is in itself a difficult idea for the common folk to grasp. They therefore try to secure an easier approach by taking up a more tangible form. Some therefore think of him as seated in the highest heaven, administering justice and benevolence to all. Others think of him as an all-pervading power controlling the universe. Thus, by degrees, we are in a way gradually drifting away from the Nirakar or formless aspect to some tangible form of Sakar. Much has been said in the religious books about the two conceptions, the Nirakar and the Sakar. But really, both the conceptions, as generally understood, are greatly misleading. Really, God is neither Nirakar nor Sakar, but beyond both. Those who treat him as Sakar limit the limitless with bounds of form and shape. The result is they cultivate narrow mindedness and remain forever within bounds. If we take him as Nirakar, the very idea brings to our mind the limitation of attributes as creator, controller, and destroyer. Even the idea of God as power or energy is still a limited conception. We go on ahead to the idea of non-entity or zero. Still, we are in a way somewhat away from reality. What then? Expression now fails. Sufficient be it to say that if we are really away from both the conceptions, we may think ourselves to be in the right direction. So long as we remain confined within the bounds of religion, the God or religion remains in our view, and we remain entangled within one or the other view. The highest spiritual attainment is only possible when we go beyond. In fact, spirituality begins where religion ends, and religion is only a preliminary stage for preparing a man for his march on the path of freedom. When he has set his foot on the path, he is then beyond the limits of religion. The end of religion is the beginning of spirituality, and the end of spirituality is the beginning of reality, and the end of reality is the real bliss. When that too is gone, we have reached the destination. That is the highest mark, which is almost inexpressible in words. I pause here.
Yeah, this is very, very important because this needs to be contemplated very seriously because if because the goal on which you're meditating, Babuji says it is divine light in the heart, and he says it is a mere supposition, and he says you should not allow the mind to play on it, because if you play that it is got light of some star or a moon or this thing, that is your imagination. It is neither light nor darkness. He says light without luminosity, and the idea should be just supposition that God is there. That's all. If any concretized concept is arising in your mind, that means it is gross.
Yes.
So when you take that idea, your mind should rest on that subtle idea. Then only you are meditating on subtleness. And our whole the burden of the song of Babuji's system is meditation on the subtlest form. Then only your mind will become subtle. So God is neither sakar nor nirakar, is beyond both. And the object which you are choosing for meditation is that is very akin to that reality which is beyond sakar or nirakar. And that is why he says you just rest your idea on the supposition that God is present. And from there, you will go to the possessor of that power. You will go to God. That is acts like a ladder which will help you to go towards your destination. Like if a sun ray is there, if ray arises from the sun, so that supposition, if you rest your mind on that supposition, that will take you to the possessor of the divine light, which is Brahman, or immaterial absolute. So this idea should be, whenever you're sitting in meditation, you should have a clear idea that it is the most subtlest, you're meditating on the most subtlest possible thing, and that is just a suggestion, as if a thought, you're meditating on a thought actually, and the thought is almost a non-existent thought without any concepts behind it. And that is, mind you, subtlest thing is present everywhere. God is also present everywhere. But for the sake of training, we are allowing His presence in our heart, and we are resting our attention on that. And continued attention with the idea of understanding the object of meditation is called dhyana. There is a clear, the definition of dhyana also you must understand. There are three things are combined. They are the dharana, dhyana, samadhi is nothing but one thing only, which it's got three parts. Dharana is called fixing your attention on a certain location. In a Sanskrit, it is called Desha Bandha Chittasya Dharana. Desha means a place. Bandha is fixing your attention on a place. Here, Babuji has given a place where the heartbeats are felt. So if you fix your attention is there, that is called dharana. And it is simultaneously, it is dharana merges into dhyana. Dhyana is, again, the Sanskrit definition you must understand. It makes a lot of concepts getting cleared. It says the Patanjali Yoga's definition of dhyana is, I'll tell you, it is it's something like this. Tatra pratyaya ekatanata dhyana, he says. That means if in that place, pratyaya is the object. Object here is divine light without luminosity. That is the object. And undistracted mental effort or attention on that object is called dhyana. That means when you're meditating, you should not have desire to know anything else other than the object you're meditating. Suppose at that time, if you have a desire, what has happened to the election, what happened to my stock market and all that, that means that is not meditation. Meditation means undistracted mental effort of continuous attention on the object to understand the nature of the object. That is also very important. So that is meditation. So this paragraph gives us a very clear idea about the object of meditation. It should be the subtlest on which you have to meditate. Any further questions on this? Otherwise, we'll go ahead.
Yeah, this is a really great message and summarizes the world problem that we are facing through, and also gives us the solution as well. So it's a very great message, sir. Yeah,
that's right.
Sorry, somebody was saying to say.
This is Atul.
Atul, bolo.
Namaste, Atul ji.
Namaste. Sir, here he says he is beyond consciousness also. He is beyond.
Did he say that?
It is beyond quality, activity, or consciousness.
So that's why he says no. The words fail altogether. You see, when the mind is forming a concept about him, that means that is wrong. So that is why. But you will merge into reality. The expression fails altogether. The idea you must understand, because it is so extremely subtle, you will not be aware of even the consciousness is what. How can I say I'm conscious? You see, there was a huge international conference on the neuroscience of consciousness. 3 days people sat together, brilliant minds, but they could not define what is consciousness. But everybody knows, have an experience of what is consciousness. But the consciousness, suppose if you can imagine Kshobh, from where the entire creation has come into existence, you can do a thought experiment and think about it. And there, that is the homeland which you're talking of. And there, the consciousness is almost non-existent there. From there, it becomes gross. When it becomes gross, you become aware of the existence. That only tries to tell you that the nature of absolute reality is a very subtle thing. From subtleness, we have become gross. You see, consciousness has been divided generally into 2 categories. One is consciousness and subconsciousness. Consciousness, Babuji uses the word physical mind for that. When you talk about your training slides, when we talk about control and concentration of mind, when he uses the physical mind, that means the conscious mind where your thoughts you can apply your will, you can think whatever you're thinking, that is the physical mind or the conscious mind. Whereas the subconscious mind includes all the spectrum, right from the Kshobh itself right up to the, all your garbage which you carry in your subconscious mind, that includes everything, and several levels of subtlety of subconscious, Brahmanda, Parabrahmanda consciousness, and then central region consciousness, the rings of splendor, all that thing form several layers of consciousness, several coverings of the soul, he uses the word. There are several layers of consciousness are there in the subconscious itself. So the subtlest thing or the origin is where consciousness also will not exist. He describes the same, the sentence which he's talking, he uses the similar language in when he talks about the 5th commandment. First paragraph, if you read, the same thing, the same words will come again there. So for your idea, I will just read another thing. I will a relevant topic, because now he has described what is called homeland. So I will, he has written a letter about homeland, I will talk about it. There's a letter written by Babuji about
Yeah, I think a little confusion might have come here, but Atul's point of reference, which if I understand correctly, because in the training programs we are saying that everything in this universe is consciousness, either the grosser or subtle form. So
subtlest form is beyond consciousness.
yeah,
Okay.
Actually, I was more coming from the point of view that in our Pranahuti slides, we talk about animal consciousness, human consciousness, and divine consciousness.
yeah,
So we say that we move in these bands, and
yeah,
we, what our goal is to try to settle in the divine consciousness, to become one with the divine consciousness. So, but
Yeah.
here Master is saying that it is
Once you become one, their consciousness also, you'll be unaware. Like a small child, as an infant, is not even aware of his existence. If you can take that metaphor or analogy, you'll be able to understand where consciousness even does not even exist. So I'll just talk about the homeland, which will also clarify your idea about what the nature of the goal and all that. You know, this is printed in the Spotlight on the True Path. Homeland, what we have after all to arrive at is our homeland. Whence we have traveled down to our present state. From the Ksho, we have traveled down to the grosser state. The following is my master's view in this matter. Listen carefully. This is highly loaded, this thing. Now, inverted commas. Where we are, we do not know. He says, where we are, we do not know. Where we have been, we know but little. I mean, earlier lives, we have, through several forms of lives and several past lives and all that, where we have been, we know but little. Is that not the clue of our homeland? So we know that we are not in our homeland. That is the target to hit at. First by the force of will, then by total dissociation from will and intellect. And the interesting point he is making, you see, first by the force of will. Dhyana you are doing, you are putting your attention on the object of meditation to understand the nature of the object of meditation. So that is dhyana, you are using your force of will. But later on, then by total dissociation from will and intellect, then you become like a dead man in the hands of a dresser, then you become an instrument of God. Because there you don't even use your intellect, or you don't even make an attempt to meditate. You're taken over by God totally. Suppose you have got this stage, then you know where you are. That means that conveys the idea that you have discovered your starting point or the origin. Okay. That is the only knowledge which one gets from all the different activities. It also shows that activity has for good been absorbed in some real center. Activity bhi chala gaya. You will become aware, like when you deep sleep, you are not aware of your consciousness, no? In Sushupti condition, mind is not present. So when mind is not there, you're not aware of consciousness also. This is a common experience for everybody. Everybody goes into deep sleep state, and deep sleep state, your mind is not existing. So when mind is not existing, world is also not existing for you. Suppose this happens in the case of all embodied souls, then the world is gone and there is complete dissolution. The activity which has gone back to the center will revive again after some time. That is the phenomena of nature. Nothing is destroyed, but it only transforms. When there is descent, there must be ascent, because the source of power which sends down activity is somewhere there. Beginning must have an end, and vice versa. The activity having revived, things returnable begin to come down again. What was the process? The essence was there. Formation of different bodies started, and man came into being. The activity brought us here together with all that we have. But since it was backed by a powerful energy, it gave out its results, which set down in different parts of the body, implanting their own effect caused by the combination of matter and soul. Now you come to the operative aspect of it. Now we begin to move within ourselves. When we meditate, the soul is at work as a commander. Mind is working passively. Heart is giving clue to each of them. When you're meditating, this is what is happening. He says, the soul is at work as a commander. Mind is working passively. Heart is giving clue to each of them. Thoughts are arising and working in their own field. The center nearest to subtleness, that is the homeland, acted as the chief governing force and produced power in its own region. That is exactly the stage found in every living soul. But we have to find out where the things originate from, where the thoughts arise from. We have to find out that. Cause and effect we do not bother about. We only deal with activity which was closest to the soul. So now even all of us are listening now. We are listening with our mind. That mind has got a center in us, and that center is actually present in the heart. But from there it becomes infinity. That's a different matter. But infinity is hidden in your heart. But all the source of your thoughts and feelings, there is a center from where those are arising. Otherwise called the mind lake also, chit lake also. The condition of the state discovered by yogis of yore might have been given in books burned down by savage hands. But now the necessity having arisen, the thing has been brought to light. Now Babuji is telling, I am bringing to light the knowledge. We have to seek out where from the nerve centers of the spinal cord regain activity for their work. God's primary thought to affect creation was there around the center, and that was the mind lake. That was the mind lake, or the thought-producing machinery of nature. It was the source of activity even when it was in its mind lake in the man's sphere. This is the source, the starting point of thought. If somehow we succeed in freezing it, that's the point where meditation, if you're doing correctly, it helps in freezing it. The activity is gone and a man will turn exactly like a living dead. Thus, in the inverted commas ends. That means the mind lake is frozen. In other words, which Patanjali talks about, chitta vritti nirodha. When the nirodha happens, when only sattva guna dominates in the mind, only God, full splendor of God will be reflected through all those five koshas of the human being. So the Ishwar Sahaya's concluding of this article is, thus in order to secure or return to that subtle state, we must necessarily take up means and practices which ensure the subtlest results and relieve us of our grossness of being. That must be the first outlook of a true abhyasi who takes up the path with earnestness. The surest path shall therefore be that which leads us not through beliefs and convictions, but through direct perception and practical experience, onwards to complete freedom. In short, the only means by which surest success is possible is spirituality in pure and unalloyed state. It is not religion, but far beyond it. It is quite simple and natural, and is in fact the only solution of man's problem. So the mind becomes frozen, and you transcend the mind. Actually, the purpose of yoga is you have to transcend the mind. The chitta vritti nirodha, mind is there to give you experience about the world and to help you in your liberation. Once you're liberated, it is like a tamed dog. It will be sitting by your side. You're not even aware of its existence. If you want to do any work, when you get any instructions or revelations, you have to perform certain actions, you become an instrument of nature. You cannot avoid it. After a certain degree of spiritual elevation, you will be doing nature's work. There is nobody can escape. That is a side effect of any yogi who's doing. He talks about it in reality at dawn towards the end, and it is so there. Then you use the mind. Mind is just like your hand or feet. It comes into your awareness when you are executing using your will to achieve something in the spiritual field. That's all. Otherwise, you are not even aware of you are. So when mind is there, you become conscious of peace. When mind is not there, it is. How will you say what is the nature of that peace? It is very difficult to put it in words. That's why when Rajesh Rana asked what is the potentiality of consciousness, words are inexpressible. So the idea of reading this is we should be clear in our mind about the thoughts of the master so that we'll be practicing correctly. That is the idea. I think we'll go ahead now. Anybody can read now. Yes. Atul, samajh mein aaya? You are understood what the idea?
Yes, yes, sir. Got the idea. It's essentially like stillness of your mind. The quality
Mind
of
becomes, you transcend the mind. You will be living in your divine consciousness. Divine consciousness, spirit, which is infinite. It is not located. Subtleness is, you can come, the analogy which is available with us is space. You can take God or absolute, immaterial absolute as similar to space. As space is infinite, you cannot even think, or you cannot even ocean ko edge ka hai bol to soche to you will be wonderstruck with awe and astonishment at the vastness of God. And when you look into the space and you look into our Milky Way galaxy itself has got 400 billion stars, and like that there are several billion galaxies are there in the universe. वो universe में center कहाँ है, कैसा can mind can grapple that vastness and this thing? It is simply we are too puny to even imagine. So you can merge into it, but your mind cannot think about it. That's why you have to transcend mind itself. That is spirituality. भगवान के बारे में सोच नहीं सकते, भगवान के साथ रह सकते आप.
right, sir.
ठीक है, let's go ahead.
If anybody wants to read, I'm okay. Otherwise, I'll continue.
Vivek, you want to read? Give rest to
Yeah,
Krishna's larynx.
yes, sir. I'll start. Worship of gods and deities in various forms is a crude development of the same Sakar theory. Worship of... Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are audible. Yeah, go ahead.
Worship of gods and deities in various forms is a crude development of the same Sakar theory. Worship of every power of nature and even of mountains, rivers and trees is a further degradation of the same view. What a pity. Instead of worshipping the master, we are worshipping the servants, ignoring the master entirely, and we are not prepared to hear even a word against our set prejudices. The result is that today we find so many sects and creeds, each worshipping its own gods or goddesses in its own particular way. Evidently, the goal before their eye is not even liberation, but in most cases, deliverance from some particular form of misery or some material gain. People are driven to such forms of worship either by the force of circumstances or through the faulty guidance of those who are themselves quite in dark in the matters of self-realization. Lord Krishna has made it clear in the Gita that worship of gods may lead you at the most to their sphere only, which is a limited one and far below the point of liberation. They themselves have no capacity to go beyond. The approach of their devotees beyond this point is therefore out of question. Thus, it is evident that these gods and deities are of no avail to us if we really aim at reality. I have illustrated the point more clearly in my book, Efficacy of Raja Yoga. So, I'll stop here, sir, if any thoughts on this. I think it pertains to... Sir, you're in mute, sir. You're on mute, sir.
It gives us an understanding how much our society, our people are so much, they do not, how much they lack in the understanding about spirituality and the value they give to spirituality. There's so much of deficiency karke pata lagta hai, if you read Babuji's thoughts. I think we'll go ahead.
Yeah.
Because we are just reading, as I told you before starting of this exercise. It's a kind of a spiritual training for us. We are trying to dwell in pious thoughts of him, so that this will work as a purification of our mind, so that when we sit in meditation in the evening of tomorrow, we will be able to get absorbed in his consciousness more easily. This is only for a purification process. But I request that all of you can, each sentence of his can be meditated deeply, and then you can bring in those standard Vedantic methods of Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. This has been my pet idea, which I talk in all these training courses and all that. When diary writing, you do this Manana, Nididhyasana. Nididhyasana, I always fond of quoting Swami Vivekananda. Like today's daily saying, he says, you should feel his presence as long as you live. So if that idea is there, Nididhyasana, Swami Vivekananda, brilliantly describes. He says, Swati Nakshatra, when it comes on the ascendant, he says the oyster comes to the surface of the ocean, and then it opens its shell, and then the raindrop falls into it. It immediately closes the shell and goes to the bottom of the ocean, and that raindrop becomes a pearl. So he says Nididhyasana should be like that. He says when you grasp the idea of the master, like today's daily saying, or whatever, when we are talking about Sakar, Niyakar, whatever idea has caught your attention, that should be taken as an inspiration from master, and then that inspired idea which is striking in your mind, you just allow that idea to rest in your conscious mind. Automatically subconscious mind also will be receiving that, and at that time you should not allow any other thought to come and disturb your contemplation. And then what happens, then that idea becomes part and parcel of your subconscious mind, in the sense a part of the consciousness of master merges into your consciousness, and to a certain degree you become a part of Babuji has become your mind actually. So when you dwell on that idea for long periods, there is what is called layavastha happens. That means that thought becomes merges in your consciousness, and you don't even know that you search for that idea because it merges with you. You become not even aware of that idea when it has merged in you, but then you behave like that. Your behavior reflects your thinking. No more will be conscious. Like suppose fraternity is there, you don't like to consciously think and try to behave like a fraternal way to your brothers. It is the subconscious is totally transformed by that thought, and then that projects into your conscious mind. It is natural for you to be have a fraternal attitude towards your friends. I mean, that becomes your nature. You no more have to think and behave like that. You are that. So that happens when the idea of the master gets absorbed in your consciousness, and that is possible. The whole day you try to retain that in your conscious mind. Then subconscious mind also keeps getting strength, and then that will drive away the impure data which we are all victims of a lot of unnecessary data from the television, from newspapers, from friends, relatives. Pura kachra bhar lete, wo kachra will not allow this divine thought to panapne nahi deta. It will not allow this thought to grow in your subconscious mind. So the idea of this reading is basically to create an atmosphere in ourselves, so that certain good master interaction in our consciousness.
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead. Yes.
Sir, Atul, just one point. The last line of the paragraph which Vivek just read is, I have illustrated the point more clearly in my book, Efficacy of Raja Yoga. So this is the point which is where we say if we worship these functionary gods and deities, do we remain stuck to the heart region, or is he pointing out something different here?
No, I think this was in Africa, in Ten Commandments में prayer के उसमें है.
यहाँ पर जैसे लाइन लिखा है ना कि I have illustrated the point more clearly in my book Efficacy of Raja Yoga.
But actually, that points he talks in
So Atul, if I remember, in the efficacy of Raj Yoga, he talks about the different functionaries and how the gods are different functionaries, and so this may be related to that, and that is why he's saying that it is not even a liberation. So that's what I recollect from the efficacy of Raj Yoga.
In heart region, right?
I don't know whether it's in heart region or where, but yeah, somewhere he talks about the functionaries and how the gods have been assigned the different functions of nature.
No, you see, I'm just reading Maxim 2. He says no particular time is fixed for the prayer. One can do it when he feels inclined to it, or else he should try to create a disposition for it required. One should always pray to him alone, who is the master in the true sense. I do not think it proper to pray to the slaves. Slaves means the gods and functionaries. That is, to those powers which are subordinate to man and which are potentialized by him. Man actually, like suppose the eyes are actually, eyes are working because of the power of the sun. The mind is working because of the power of the moon. So those gods actually control various sense organs and various faculties. So praying to them, but Babuji says those gods are actually potentialized by man itself. So you should not, that is the idea he talks. I do not think it proper to pray to the slaves, to those powers which are subordinate to man, which are potentialized by him. The ravages of time have now reduced them to a consumptive state. Consumptive was the tuberculosis. It is also sheer folly to pray to the great master. Anyway, we'll not think too deeply about it. It will not directly helpful. We'll just note it and go forward with it.
Okay.
Should I read forward, sir?
Yeah, you read forward, yes.
Mechanical forms of worship commonly adopted by those hankering after gods and goddesses to serve their worldly ends is also another absurdity. It is no worship at all. They only play the part of a laborer, so to say, and at the close they get their day's wages for the physical labor done. The solid material form of God entertained by them in the mind and worshipped with faith and devotion leads to internal grossnesses, and if the practice continues for a long time, they become more and more solid, barring their approach to reality. The result in such cases is evident to almost every eye. Ancient sages, finding worship of the immaterial absolute a difficult task for the masses to start with, had devised certain convenient means for their uplift. They made a start by taking up something apparent in the solid form, which the masses could easily grasp or understand. Now the things which could be easily grasped or understood were different for different people. For the people of the lowest standard, they adopted something in the apparently solid form. For others, more elevated, some abstract form, example splendor, light, or any godly attribute, was introduced to start with. For highly cultured minds, a subtle idea of God was enough. Thus, it was only for the people of the lowest standard that they had adopted the solid form, such as picture or image, and that too only as a temporary measure. When they attained some progress, they gave it up and embarked upon the next stage, taking upon a finer form. It is just like teaching, writing to a baby, making her move her pen along the prints of letters. After a little practice, the process is given up and the baby is able to write independently without the help of the prints. Thus, the solid form or the image was to be adopted by beginners for a time only, after which they came to the next stage. Besides, the image set up for the purpose was fully charged with the spiritual force so that those sitting by in devotion and worship gained some of its through constant radiation. Now, persons of caliber having the power to infuse into the image the spiritual force are rare, although the process of pran pratishtha still continues as a matter of mere formality. The result is that the places and images thus charged thousands of years ago have by this time almost lost their effect, and consequently no practical gain is derived by those going there for devotion and worship. It is, however, beyond doubt that the process was introduced only for the people of the lower standard with little brain, who could not otherwise devote themselves to the Lord in any way. It is but certain that the practice, if tenaciously followed to the last, defeats its very own purpose and does not provide any spiritual advantage. Saint Kabir has nicely expressed the idea in the following lines: पाहन पूजे हरि मिले तो पूजिए पहाड़, ताते यह चक्की भली पीस खाए संसार. If by worshipping stone one can reach God, I shall be ready to worship a mountain. But for this purpose, the grinding stone which grinds the corn to feed the world may be better. So I'll stop here.
Yeah, we'll stop here. It's quite clear, no? There's nothing.
Yeah, I think pran pratishtha is the key here in terms of. So, Atul, you want to read the next paragraphs?
Okay. To my view, those who stick to this sort of worship throughout their life are wading deep through the mire of ungodliness. It is extremely difficult to extricate them out of it. In course of time, after constant practice, they become so firmly rooted to it that they cannot even think of getting away from it at any stage. They remain at a standstill. They do not want to get rid of the ideas they have already imbibed. Further, they apply their power or thought and make them stronger and more solid. Everything casts a reflection in a form similar to its own. If the thing is subtle, its reflection will also be subtle in character, and if it is gross, the reflection will likewise be gross. If we concentrate on a solid thing, we are sure to become ourselves inwardly solid. Great havoc has been wrought by teachers who have presented to the ignorant masses everything they had learned from the holy books in hard and solid form. It destroys the reflexive power of mind. If one develops such a horrible state, he is gone forever. He loses his approach to a broader vision, and the capacity for further progress become extinct. Such persons may be compared to frogs in the well, with a little field of activity which they consider all and enough. They remain whirling round in a closed sphere, hemmed in on all sides. They are hammering on the same thing all their life. Stories and illustrations of God are all and enough for them. When the practice continues for long, the cells of the brain are affected and they become saturated with the thoughts, which grow stronger day by day. Finally, the whole nervous system is affected. The external opacity gradually creeps inward and completes the work. They are now completely impervious, both within and without, to the passage of the divine light. Their approach to the inner self is completely barred. I shall prefer to call them living stones. The hardened crust which they have developed keeps them aloof from slightest association with anything higher or finer. They are almost spellbound by its effects, which they consider to be a spiritual stage, although in fact they are far away from it. My personal experience in the spiritual field has revealed to me that it is a pretty hard and tedious task to shatter the hard crust created by such forms of practice from the hearts of those coming to me for spiritual pursuit. If one wants to free oneself from these bondages of soul, he must necessarily clear off the layer of grossness and solidity settled over his mind as a result of these stultifying practices.
He has put so much of psychology into this paragraph. Actually, I'm very interesting. He says nervous system is affected. He says external opacity gradually creeps inside and completes the work. And now it becomes completely impervious to both within and without. You know, the modern neuroscience has made tremendous advances in the past 2 or 3 decades. And then now very clear understanding is there. So the what is conscious mind and what is subconscious mind. The conscious mind now they say is can process information at 40 to 50 bits per second. Whereas the subconscious mind processes 225 million bits per second. That means I'm sitting talking to you, my brain, subconscious brain, you know, sees that my posture is maintained, it is able to process sensory information from my liver, sugar levels, and then protein levels, the joint sensation from the various joints, all the information automatically keeps on processing. That's why when you see any hypnotist in action, he will hypnotize a person and say on such and such a day of birthday, what all you have seen, he'll recollect all the things which he doesn't even consciously remember. So subconscious is a very powerful force within us. That's why Babuji says people don't give proper suggestions to the mind, he says. That is very important point for us in this connection, because if we give proper suggestions, the subconscious mind with its huge capacity will be our ally actually. And then it will help us realize our dreams, help us realize our conscious mind to follow the 10 commandments naturally. So if you want to follow the 10 commandments spontaneously and naturally, when you can call yourself a saint, that is only possible when the subconscious mind is totally transformed into a spiritual splendor. That is possible by giving right suggestions. Apan kya kar rahe? Generally, majority of the people, bedtime prayer you have to do. Bedtime prayer you should actually relax and then think carefully and then meditate and get into the state of absorption. Then at that time, all that bedtime prayer will become an instruction to your subconscious mind. It will be working to fulfill your instruction to the subconscious mind. But what is happening? We upon WhatsApp message dekh rahe, Facebook dekh rahe, television dekh rahe, all those data is entering, and it will not allow divinity to. The subconscious mind will only implement whatever suggestions you are getting from the environment. Environment will only give you wrong suggestions or evil suggestions. It will drive you towards materialism only. So in a way, intelligent abhyasi will grasp the instructions of the master, and then they are very simple instructions. But if he uses those instructions, the subconscious mind will be transformed, and then it becomes conscious mind becomes disciplined. if they keep on doing, going on the thought that the idol itself is God, instead of remembering that idol represents an all-pervasive God. Generally, the idea of all-pervasive God is present everywhere. That is not held by even I think even 0.11% of the people go to the temples or to the churches or mosques and all that. That is not held at all. Only the grosser idea comes to their conscious mind. And so that's why the whole problem human society is facing is because they are nowhere near spiritual happiness or spiritual values. They don't give any value to spirituality and life, real life, which is of the nature of happiness itself. That is not given. So that is why we are at a tremendous advantage, because at least 1 hour in the morning we are training our mind to think about the subtlest reality, or the cause or the force or God which has created the whole universe, including yourself, myself, and all the world. And we are training our mind to rest there, so that our mind gradually starts understanding about the true nature of God or reality, or self-realization happens. But general people, they can never think about the all-pervasiveness of God. And from there, all the world stands is a superstructure. The foundation is God. So their mind never goes towards God. And once it is not there, and all problems, the lack of knowledge itself causes problems in the life of human being. As Socrates says, knowledge is power, knowledge is happiness, knowledge is wisdom. So if you don't have knowledge about God, you're bound to suffer miseries. There's no other alternative for anybody.
Sir, is this like medically proven?
Which one?
That the cells of the body are kind of replaced 100% in 7 or 8 years?
Yes. You see, that is what they do. They give a radioactive isotope. Like suppose bone may jana, phosphorus is there, whatever, or that isotope gets deposited in the bone, and after 7 years it is not there. That is why the Babuji also claims that if you are dependent on God, if you surrender, he says, is very difficult. He says when you have the idea of surrender, the idea of ego is also there. That is not surrender. It should come naturally. So that's why what he says is the dependency on God. That means the feeling dependence on God. If you feel dependence on God for 7 months, you're transformed totally. You'll be liberated.
Okay.
Like suppose now you have breakfast. During breakfast time, you're meditating. Actually, you're supposed to meditate while eating breakfast or dinner, lunch or whatever it is. That means as you're doing 1 hour morning meditation, the same process, thinking about the all-pervasiveness of God, and then keeping it in the heart, and then trying to pay undistracted attention on that. You have to train it. And then at that time, what happens? That force, get incorporated, because everything is consciousness only. Food is also consciousness. Your body is also consciousness. So that gets impregnated with that feeling, and that feeling gets incorporated into your structures. And then your mind will immediately be given a tremendous boost to think about God naturally. You don't have to struggle at all if you really follow his instructions. So this is a fact. The body is totally changed. Every cell of the body is not the same. This is again the famous Heraclitus, a very famous philosopher of the West. And he talks about you cannot step into the river, same river twice.
Right.
That's why jokes also. Sir also used to crack this joke after Heraclitus. Like suppose I take some 1 lakh loan from Vivek Joshi. Tomorrow you come and ask Madhav, मेरे को पैसा वापस कर दो. वो माधव कौन था? वो दूसरा आदमी था. मैं ये तो दूसरा आदमी हूँ. Why should I give? This is the joke of Sir actually about Heraclitus observation.
We basically impact that when we are doing meditation. We are having an influence on the Hoto process. Basically, Hoto is a term we use in our office where one person goes away and he gives his responsibilities to the new incumbent who's coming in. As we are meditating, one cell basically gives a handover to the other new cell that is forming. And during the handover, since we are meditating and thinking about the master, the new cell that gets created is slightly better than the older cell that is dying.
You have to understand, you have raised a very interesting point. That is why the idea of constant remembrance becomes very important when you raise this issue. Inadvertently, you brought this idea. You see, the mind. What is the purpose of meditation? Meditation we are doing. We know that this world is temporary. We know that someday you are going to die, but still our attachment with this world continues. We continue to suffer because of undue attachment to our possessions, our body, our property, wealth, children, wife, and all that. Though they are temporary, we are unduly attached to them. Why are we unduly attached to them? Because we are swimming or floating in an atmosphere where only this environment is there. The whole humanity, your friends, relatives, neighbors, religious people, they believe in this idea that happiness is present in possessions, happiness is present in name and power and prestige. Everybody believes. You also believe. So once you believe, tacitly agree that this is real thing. So now Babuji is telling that the treasure of the nectar of happiness is in your heart. And when your mind is taken refuge in the kingdom of God or in your homeland, you are in a blissful state continuously. So he is telling, and now when you're meditating, we are training our mind to get conditioned to this reality. So 1 hour you train your mind, and then remaining 23 hours or you slept about 5-6 hours, remaining 15-16 hours, you are continue to support the general idea of the society that promotion mein so paisa kamaya to acha hai, wo karke. So 1 step you're moving and 15 steps you're going backwards. So how can there be progress? So instead, if you, while going to office work, 1 minute, Babuji gives you an advice. He says, 1 minute sincerely think that whatever work I am doing, I am dedicating to that my master. Karke, you jump into the work. And all the 8 hours of work you are doing becomes worship. Then you are in, that is constant remembrance. Then you know your meditation which you have done in the morning doesn't go waste. Otherwise, if you forget God, the whole 1 hour of meditation is waste. Without constant remembrance, meditation is a waste actually. It's my personal observation. Okay.
You want to read the last paragraph, Dharmesh?
Dakshinamurthy sir wants to talk.
Yeah. No, I just want a clarification. The state which is presented in this paragraph, does it pertain to any of the what we think is the avadhuta state in this condition? Where the neurological status has become totally opaque inside and outside, and they don't perceive anything else.
That he is talking about grossness. Avadhuta, what happens is, Babuji talks very clearly about avadhuta. What happens is, subconscious mind, as I told you, there is a whole spectrum from the subtlest divinity up to the conscious mind. And once you start meditating, and because of the power of meditation, the knot unfolds actually. And when the knot unfolds, the character or the spiritual character of that knot becomes conscious in your mind. And you will be enjoying that consciousness. And what happens? From one knot to another knot, there is a intervening space called barzakh or a buffer zone actually. there people get stuck up there. And even in that knot itself, they start enjoying it. They don't want to come out of it, and they don't have the power to come out of it also, because it is a revolving motion. So unless a guru guru breaks that network, he cannot come out of that and move into the next realm of next subtler realm of consciousness. So that is a spiritual state, but then you are stuck there in that spiritual. Here it is a grossness. There will be no Avaduta is a very higher condition. It's a spiritually very advanced state only, even first stage itself. But here it is all grossness. The idea of the whole room, it is completely covered. Windows are covered with black thing. No light can enter. So the grossness of subconscious and conscious mind, if he practices idol worship, can be so bad that not even a ray of the happiness from God is capable of percolating into you.
Okay.
So just a time check. This is the last paragraph, another form, and about 2 pages. We are at 12:35, so we should continue. Is everyone okay? Or
you ask the. I was not conscious of time. I don't know if other people have been in this thing.
Vivek? Okay.
Or you can stop and we'll continue next time. I think 1.5 hours. Or do you want to finish this topic? We'll finish this topic.
I think we'll just finish the reading, I was thinking.
We'll finish the reading because at least one chapter we have finished.
Yeah, I think
Though we are not going in detail about it. The ideas of master will be entering our minds. So we'll finish the topic. Reading is very fast. Yeah.
Atul?
No, you please read the last one, Dharmesh.
Okay, fine. That's fine. Yeah. Another form of worship commonly thought to be more advanced is to sing or recite in chorus lines in praise of the god or goddesses they worship. People assemble together in parties at late hours in the night, sing in chorus at the top of their voice, disturbing the calm atmosphere of the night. They think that they are thereby discharging a pious duty of injecting, as they say, into the ears of as many as they can the sacred name of God. Not only this, they sometimes even make use of microphone to broadcast the sound. They are totally unmindful of the discomfort or inconvenience it might cause to persons who may possibly be in need of quiet repose after their day's tiring labor or illness. It may at the same time be offering serious disturbance to those who practice meditation in the calm hours of night. Moreover, the practice as generally followed today is of no great utility in our spiritual progress, and consequently no substantial gain is derived therefrom. The chanting of the Sankirtanists may be compared more appropriately to the groans of a sick man, which only offer him temporary consolation but do not actually relieve him of the pain. So these chantings are of no avail to them except that they are charmed by the effect of the sweet melody, which helps to draw their thoughts for the time being to the ideal in view. Now, whatever we think or contemplate produces vibrations within. When these vibrations multiply, they create power which gushes out with the sound. The vibrations carry with them the effect of thoughts and feelings of individuals. So the pious effect of the pure minds in the company is likely to be spoiled by the evil effect of impious minds. The undesirable element must therefore be kept away if full advantage is to be derived from these performances. Such was the practice followed by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who held Sankirtans, congressional chants with the party consisting only of those thoroughly known to him for goodness and piety. The performance was therefore conducted behind closed doors and no outsider was allowed in. Sankirtan, in fact, does not offer means of preliminary advancement but is rather helpful only to some extent after sufficient advancement. It is most effective only when conducted in congenial atmosphere, overflowing with pious thoughts. It may also serve as a recreative change after serious mental practices. Moreover, unfortunately today, the ideal too kept in view during these practices is not the highest. In most cases, they remain all along in close touch with the idea of gods in the physical form, keeping in view their gross body and activities. The effect of this gross conception is nothing but internal grossness and opacity, which they inhale all along during the practice. A gross conception will necessarily keep you within bounds and limitations, and final approach or absolute freedom can never be possible. This is the reason why, in spite of years of practice, they find themselves at the lowest level of attainment. They are, so to say, searching everything in a stagnant pool where even oxygen necessary for the upkeep of life if is wanting. They have made such a pool of their permanent abode. Proper light is needed to make pulse. What we must strive for in order to secure absolute freedom from bondage is to become the lightest and the finest, closely corresponding with the godly attributes and securing complete similarity with Him. The nectar of real life is for him and him alone who bring himself up to the standard required for the purpose.
One point I just want to highlight is, you see, he's talking. Now, whatever we think or contemplate produces vibrations within. When these vibrations multiply, they create power which gushes out with the sound. The vibrations carry with them the effect of thoughts and feelings of the individuals. So whenever we must know, Sir also highlighted this fact, whenever we are meditating, whenever our attention, continued attention is there on the presence of divine light in the heart, the effect of that is percolates into the surrounding atmosphere. That is the greatest, and because our minds are not separate from the cosmic mind or separate from other minds. All is part of a cosmic mind. So when we are meditating sincerely, we are doing the greatest social service to society actually. So whenever you have free time, if you sincerely meditate, I think you are doing greatest service to humanity actually.